Please rise as you are able. Today we gather in this room, a room where Karl Martin Garlid spent many of his days, to remember a man who changed each and every one of our lives and thereby changed the world. Would you join me in prayer? Creative hands of the universe, thank you for Karl. Thank you for memories. Thank you for stories. Thank you for time and space to tell our stories and to remember. Amen.
In times of trouble, our faith tradition points us to the Psalms, those ancient liturgical songs that have remarkable resonance with human need in any era. Psalm 46 is one that spoke to Karl. Here it is from the Revised Standard Version of the Bible. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She will not be moved. God will help her right early. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has wrought desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow. He shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Power, passion, and peace. The psalmist weaves these into poetry that meant something important to Karl. He may have heard echoes of his own powerful passions. He may have found a sense of refuge in a God who is a very present help in trouble. He may have found comfort in a God whose power is greater than the roar of the sea, the trembling of mountains, and wars that reach to the ends of the earth. I hope so. And I hope that Karl, who was the son of a Lutheran pastor, heard these words so often that they found root in his soul and brought him a powerful peace in his own tumultuous struggle. So as we gather today to mourn Karl's death and to celebrate his life, may these words live in us, providing a glimpse of his soul, one we all love dearly, and may they bring us all peace as well.
Karl and I were friends for nearly a half century. In so many ways, Karl was there in my life. It is impossible to do justice to the ways in which he was there. One thing I can assure you, he is still here. We first met as new teachers to Friends Academy on the North Shore of Long Island in September of 1966 at a conference newcomers to Quakerism were required to attend at Pendle Hill in Pennsylvania. Karl and I related to each other almost immediately. We were both of Norwegian extraction, something both of us took great pride in. We both had been raised as Lutherans. We were both English majors and would be working in the same department. We both had keen interests in the arts overall. We both were avid readers and loved to talk about writers we liked. Karl introduced me to Isak Dinesen. I don't remember which of us first happened on Vita Sackville West, but one of my treasured books is the first edition of the Edwardians, which he gave me many years ago. Karl loved literature, and this passion was conveyed to his students, who liked his warmth as a person and also profited from his overall discernment in literature. One student in his first year 9th grade class wrote to another colleague of how Karl had turned her on to poetry and made her like it in a way she hadn't before. She was especially fond of Hopkins's Pied Beauty and apparently made her daughter love it too. So the daughter made a quilt with lines from the poem embroidered on it. It seemed very fitting that the warmth he excited in his former student continued to give her warmth in this new fashion. Because Karl had both a keen eye for high quality and a desire to achieve high quality in whatever he did, I need to mention some of Karl's many talents, which I hope will give you an idea of the range of his interests and expertise. At Friends, he first directed some of the upper school plays, but with the arrival of someone hired specifically to direct the plays, he took over the technical side of theater productions. The theater was actually an ill-equipped stage in the girls' gym, with no proper backstage area and certainly no dressing rooms. It had primitive lighting. Karl soon devised a way to light the stage property by rigging a beam with lights onto one of the cross beams in the ceiling and hooking it up to a booth in a small room up the staircase on the side of the gym. I cannot tell you what a difference this made in the quality of the lighting on stage and the dramatic effectiveness of the productions. This mastery of lighting influenced the way he took pictures. He was an excellent photographer, with a capacity to catch the light like an impressionist painter. On his trip to Venice a couple of years ago, he took photos that caught superbly that city of water and light and mounted some of the pictures on beautiful greeting cards, of which I still have a number and use only for special occasions. As I said earlier, Karl had tremendous warmth. He had an intelligence and wit, too, an irreverent sense of humor that often sent me into loud laughter. He always seemed pleased with himself when he got to my funny bone. I remember one recent incident when I visited him at the rehab center in Cobble Hill. It was on a weekend, and he was chafing at not getting rehab over long weekends because he remained determined to get home as fast as he could. When I got to the room, he told me that an attendant had just been there to take his temperature in his ear. She was having great difficulty getting the thermometer into his ear. Maybe it would help, Karl told her, if you took out my hearing aid. He was fun to be with overall because he had little time for bunkum and pretentiousness, and he could puncture both with a pithy and well-turned phrase. He had a keen appreciation of the comedy of life. After 11 years at Friends, Karl decided he needed to change the pace in life. For a time, he worked as a manager at Lady Astor's restaurant in the East Village. He was a superb cook and baker. His cherry pies were made with wonderfully tart Romanian cherries and mouth-watering. After he and Mary married and bought their brownstone in Brooklyn, 111 Cambridge became a place of enormous hospitality. I believe it necessary to say at this point that Mary Meyer was the best thing that happened to Karl. At their inn, there always seemed to be room. Again, Karl and Mary turned their home into a showcase. Karl laid the parquet floors on 2 floors with his usual skill and aesthetic savvy. He built a pond in the garden he and Mary fashioned in the backyard of their 2 adjoining brownstones. He managed to do most of the work in maintaining the 2 properties himself, using his ingenuity to get the problem solved. He was very good with his hands. He could also knit and crochet. But the detail that I believe best shows something about both Karl and the pleasure of being at 111 with Mary and Karl occurred at an annual Christmas dinner for a small number of friends from Long Island and Judson. We started with a lavish dinner, never repeated in another year, so always a delightful new dining treat, cooked by Karl and Mary, of course. Karl usually baked the pies. After dinner, we would repair to the living room to draw numbers for inexpensive Christmas presents we had each brought, in which we could take from one another. We could count on Karl to make some comment that provoked our laughter while all this riot of present giving was going on. I always called that evening the authentic beginning of Christmas. In the windows at the front of the living room stood a 10-foot Christmas tree that Karl and Mary had driven to New Jersey to select and tote home. Sometimes we helped put decorations on the tree because getting the tree up early in December was a challenge with busy schedules. But putting the lights on the tree was Karl's domain alone. Fastidiously, so that there was never a dark area on any branch of that tree, Karl wrapped 3,200 white lights around the branches. When it was fully lit, it was almost blinding. Karl put a dimmer on the lights. I think of that tree as emblematic of my beloved friend. At full throttle, the tree was ablaze with radiance. But even when the dimmer was on, as the dimmer came on in those last weeks of Karl's life, the tree was radiant, beautiful to look at, and so appropriate for a place where people were welcome, laughter was abundant, and generosity evident at every turn.
Hi, I'm Maja-Lisa, Karl and Mary's neighbor and friend. When I was little, I was very impressed by Karl's beard, but I wasn't fooled by it like the other kids who thought Karl was Santa Claus. Although the beard was similar to Santa's, it was so clearly just Karl underneath. However, I didn't doubt that he knew Santa. In fact, I was positive they had crossed paths. And anyone who has seen Karl's famous Christmas tree can understand why a little girl would come to that conclusion. When I was a little older, Karl introduced my sister and me to the troll who lives in a cage in Karl and Mary's parlor. Karl explained to us that the troll was alive. Yasmin and I kept trying to catch it move, but the damn thing only moved when we turned our backs. Only Karl's eyes were fast enough to spot it. At many dinners, when we got bored of the grown-ups, we stared, transfixed at the troll. One time, I lied and told Yasmin I saw it move. She knew I was lying, though. There was no way my eyes were as fast as Karl's. The older I got, the more I appreciated Karl's wit and dry sense of humor. When I was in high school, I introduced Karl to my first serious boyfriend. Later, when I asked Karl if he liked the guy, he nodded his head somewhat. But when that same boy broke my heart, Karl reassured me it wasn't my fault. He insisted that's what happens when you mix with avid Republicans. Last fall, during my freshman year of college, I had a manic episode. I was hospitalized and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had to leave school, come home, and seek treatment. Karl was also in treatment, except his was chemo. Life works in funny ways. While being sick and having to leave school was painful, spending time with Karl and Mary softened the blow. One day I was so manic I couldn't sit down, so I went to visit Karl. In his big chair, he calmly watched me as I circled the coffee table for the 100th time. Finally, I stopped and looked at him. He had become more frail. I asked him, "You're going to get better, right?" I searched his face with the same confidence he had used when explaining the troll's capabilities many years ago. He took some time replying, but then said, "I don't think so. But you know what I do know? You're going to be fine. You're going to be great. So if I don't get better, you're just going to have to get better enough for the two of us." While only one person, Karl played many roles in my life. He was a loyal friend, a wise parent, a compassionate grandparent, and a reliable neighbor. Looking around this room, I'm positive he was many things to each of you as well. Not having him around is painful, but we were blessed with years, and for some of you, decades of beautiful memories. We will keep him in our heart always, and maybe every Christmas while dressing your tree, add a few more lights in his honor.
For anyone who may not know me, or anyone who has not looked at today's program, I am Karl's younger brother, Peter. Little brother, as Karl's always said. Mary asked me to speak today, so I am here as the family representative. And with me in spirit are all the Japan family that Karl had. My wife Michiko, our daughter Emmy and her husband Fukunori and their sons Ray and Louie, our son Isamu and his wife Ayano, and their son Takemasa, who Karl never had the chance to meet, tease, or be silly with. My wife's mother, too, Great-Grandma Sawada. Today I would rather be almost any place on the face of the earth than here for this purpose. But this is where I should be and have to be. Because Karl was the best brother I could have. And my best friend, too. Mary asked that I say a few words about Karl, the Karl that you may not know very well, the young Karl, the Karl before New York. I'll try to be brief. Karl never liked long-windedness unless it was a funny story that almost made him pass out. If I get to be too long, I feel as though Karl will come back here, will grab my hands and bend my fingers back and demand that I kiss his feet like he did when I was still too young and too weak and could be tortured in that way. Karl, you're forgiven. I don't know how much of Karl's early story you know. I'm sure some of you have heard some of it from him. But by combining my Karl with yours, you will, I hope, have a better picture of who he was and what made him tick. On August 3rd, 1944, the population of the village of Ellendale, Minnesota, increased from 300 and something to 300 and something plus one, with the birth of Karl Martin Garlid at the hospital in Albert Lea, Minnesota, the firstborn of Eunice Stoltenberg Garlid and Gerald Wayne Garlid. Dad was a Lutheran minister, making Karl a preacher's kid, a PK. PKs are infamous for turning out really bad or turning out really good. I hope we agree on how Karl turned out. One thing that PKs do really well is move. Not in the dancing or athletic move. No, those are Karl's I never saw. No, what I mean is the move that means saying goodbye to all your friends, seeing everything you have loaded into a moving van, crawling into the back seat of the car for the drive to the new home, where when you arrived, members of the Church Ladies' Aid were there to meet you, and in the parsonage would have a loaf of banana bread or lime jello with little marshmallows in it, or a hot dish To those of you who are not from the Midwest, a hot dish is a casserole. Karl led the nomadic existence of the PK. He went through these moves 5 times by the time he was 18. On average, about 3.5 years in a place. Ellendale to Appleton, Minnesota, which was no bigger than Ellendale. And that's where I came on the scene. Appleton to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Chippewa Falls to Torrance, California. Torrance, California to Marin County, California, with a half year in an apartment in Corte Madera and then a half year in Larkspur, in the first house the folks ever owned. The uprootings could be wrenching, especially the one to Marin, just before Karl's last year in high school. But in the end, I think they played a very large part in making Karl the person you knew. Some of you are probably aware that Karl was not a great fan of vegetables. That's Chippewa Falls. We grew up eating canned string beans that were cooked until they were gray for food safety. I bet you didn't know that Karl was a Boy Scout. He made the most wonderful Indian headdress at Boy Scout camp, and I think it's the first time I can ever remember thinking, my brother is really cool. One summer in Chippewa, Karl must have been 8 or 9, he collected monarch butterfly caterpillars. At that time in Minnesota, there was milkweed growing all over the state, and the monarch butterflies would come in their millions all the way from Mexico to breed. He took the caterpillars into our shared bedroom, and as they crawled around the bedroom, suddenly we had cocoons hanging everywhere. And then one morning, we woke to a room full of orange and black butterflies fluttering around us. He was the coolest brother you could ever have. He gave me a Gabriel Garcia Marquez moment when I was 4. Did you know that Karl loved orchids? That's the father of a friend in Torrance at the church who grew them as a hobby and hooked Karl. He came home wanting to build a greenhouse, and I bet he could have if he had gotten the okay from Dad. Karl was also on the speech and debate team at South High in Torrance, going all the way to the state tournament. Did you know that Karl could drive a dump truck? Marin again. A church member who gave Karl a summer job helping to build gas stations. Did you know that Karl could sing? He sang in the choir in every church our father had. But for some reason, he didn't want to sing at Judson. Throughout his young years, Karl was exposed to all kinds of people, even in the Lutheran Church. I see you know something about Lutherans. lived in all kinds of places, was made adaptable and resilient. Like all of us, I think, Karl became who he was because of his upbringing and in spite of his upbringing. As the good son, the elder son, the bright son, Karl felt the constant pressure to follow in Dad's footsteps and fill a pulpit somewhere. But Karl made his escape to Williams College, as he always said, as far away as I could get in the continental United States from California and from Dad and that pressure. And that must have been terrible pressure. From Williams and his BA in English, he ended up on Long Island, as Roger said, teaching at Friends Academy, with a sabbatical year in Italy included. Ah, some of you say, now I understand the love of Venice thing. And from here is where the Karl that many of you know appears. The husband to Mary, the restaurant manager, the computer guy at Bernard Hodis, the Judson person, the chauffeur, the barbecuer, the master carpenter, floor layer, plumber, Santa Claus at Christmas, the cherry pie maker extraordinaire, which everybody mentions, and the patient, passionate, obsessed Christmas tree light stringer. Like any child, father inherited some of each parent. Mom's skill with her hands and perseverance to get something done exactly right. And from Dad, his passion. Passion for language and passion for good. And from both of them, the knowledge that life is about and caring for others. Karl never became what his father hoped. But boy, oh boy, did he become his own kind of good and caring person. All of these Karls are one and the same person. I give thanks for having had him as my brother for 65 years and miss him terribly. But thank you, all of you, for being here today to remember him, to help say goodbye to him, and give thanks for having had him as a classmate, fellow congregant, colleague, and friend. I hope memories of Karl will bring warmth to your hearts and smiles to your faces for years to come.
My name is Kathryn Goria, a longtime friend of Karl and Mary. Mary and I were roommates living at the East 6th Street apartment before she met Karl, and over the years we have become family. When Mary asked me to say a few words about Karl, I was both honored and apprehensive. I fretted about getting up before people I didn't know to talk about what is so hard to verbally convey. It then occurred to me that while I haven't met most of you, I know you. Because in being part of Karl and Mary's life, strangers are somehow threaded together to become a community residing under the umbrella of their big hearts. Karl's heart was big and wide and deep. He was a bear of a man, usually dressed in an old shirt and jeans, sporting a cap and describing himself as Sven the carpenter. He had the emotional understanding and sensitivity of an artist while remaining grounded and real. I think he minimized his great gifts, but I'm sure all of us were touched at some point by his quiet, steady generosity and presence. He moved into my heart without force or fanfare, never needing to work on a friendship by talking things to death. The strength of our bond seemed to form almost without notice. He was simply there. I could count on him. Each time I walked down Cambridge Street to 111 and saw him at his desk from the street, I knew that the minute I stepped into their home, I would feel a sense of relief. Because he was so completely himself, I could be fully myself. To be together with such ease and loving acceptance was manna to my soul. I miss him terribly. Karl was unique. He was at home equally with a hammer and saw as he was with classic literature, theater, and opera. His artistry is reflected in this unique combination of talents, and his keen aesthetic sense is on display in the home he and Mary transformed as urban pioneers. Yet it was through the ordinary, everyday things he did that Karl best expressed his love for us. His readiness to help, to be there when a friend needed a favor, transportation, something to be fixed, even playing Santa for neighborhood children, was like an embrace, bringing us into his world and getting to know ours. His heart welcomed and enfolded us, creating a sense of belonging for those he was with. That he would never think what he did was anything special spoke to his deep humility. Karl didn't need many words to explain his love or his loyalties, but one could feel them through his abundant acts of kindness and thoughtfulness. I am reminded of words to a song written by Al Carmines. Ordinary things, I love you. Ordinary things make my heart sing. These words say everything about the way Karl lived his life. It was out of this life, so well lived and inclusive of others, that Karl, along with Mary, built a community and provided a safe harbor for their many friends. That community came together this past Christmas to carry on a tradition that all had come to count on, the magnificent Karl Garlid Christmas tree. When it looked like there was a possibility of not having one this past season, friends rushed in to save the tradition, with Karl in the director's chair. That says everything about how what he created and who he was impacted others, and how after a lifetime of thinking about and doing for others, others were thinking about and doing for him. Nothing could exemplify the essence of community nor the spirit of thanks more. The ordinary became extraordinary this past March when, after the blessing of remission, Karl and Mary mustered up strength to be present for my daughter's wedding in Galway, Ireland. No gift could have been greater or more expressive of their love. I will never forget our time there together, and I know my daughter Megan and her husband Tim won't either. The morning Karl died, I found myself thinking of my time in Inishmaan in the Aran Islands last summer when my husband Art and I took a long walk around the island, and where time vanishes the longer one walks. We had just learned about Karl's diagnosis. Being on Inishmaan is a most unusual experience. It is land, rocks, sea, and sky. Mary and I once spoke of how the Celts described thin places where heaven and earth almost touch to reveal the divine. That was our experience at the island's edge. Karl and Mary were on our hearts that day, so we gathered up rocks and built a monument of healing for Karl, pointing to the heavens. I know it is still standing there, standing steadily and will remain so, just as our beautiful friend stands steadily inside us. I can think of no better embodiment of the thin place than the holiness of Karl's big, wide, loving heart welcoming us all, mixed with his earthy, authentic, grounded self, ready to call out what was not real. Dearest Karl, I carry you in my heart.
A couple of days after Karl's wake at Karl and Mary's house, Bill Alden sent a bunch of pictures. He emailed a bunch of pictures. Maybe some of you got them, just one after another, of the tens of people who showed up to honor Karl that afternoon. And beautiful, beautiful pictures. I was at work and had them on my computer, and I had gotten a new CD in the mail of some Texas singers, and I had it playing as I was watching the one picture after another, many of you, and this particular song came on. I knew this song from another recording, but it seemed to say this is, it has just so much of Karl's spirit in it, his sense of humor, his cantankerousness, and what I loved about it was just your faces kept showing up as I was singing, or as I was listening to the song, Company of Friends. And so I sent a copy of it to her, I sent a copy of it to Mary, and I'm honored as we sing it. So. Let them
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm one of the ministers here. And at times like this, I don't think there's anything ministers can ever say that isn't said better in song. And Andy just did it. I also, when you look at this picture at the back, there's a bullshit meter that that I always feel like I see when I look at Karl. And if you look at that picture, you basically can't violate it in some way. Andy's song picks up one of the scriptures that Mary wanted us to refer to today. It's from the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and then let us run with perseverance the race that is marked for us. In its own way, this is a verse that reminds us in our mourning to raise a glass of consciousness and not to drop even a spill for grief. So I will not linger in any abstractions, theological or otherwise, for my friend. My very first real conversation with anyone here at this church was with Karl, and it was about how ministers like myself can so often get such moments entirely wrong. I was right here when that happened. But it reminds me, and he reminded me, that when it comes to the great mysteries of our lives, what the mind can never penetrate through intellectual reflection, the heart can know directly from the inside out. We know things in our love for each other that can never be proven or pointed to or said. Our friend Karl has joined the great cloud of witnesses that surrounds us in the air. And though the visible world is poorer for his loss, the invisible world opens up to us every time someone we love so much merges and fuses with that cloud. Love is the heart remembering that it is still connected to everything, and it is only in that experience that the infinite and undying realities are revealed to us. So while we must say goodbye to our friend in one form, let us not let him go. Let us not give him up. That mysterious affection we have for him, that we continue to share, because this remains our tether to the ocean of real life underneath the waves of birth and death. And let us feel that ocean when we say to ourselves in this place, we miss you, Karl. We love you, Karl. Amen.
If Karl were here, he'd be looking at his watch right about now and wondering how much longer they were going to drag this thing out. Not much longer, I promise. Thinking about knowing I was going to go at the end, I wanted to get my statement down to one or two sentences, and I couldn't do it. Because the one or two sentences that might describe Karl best for me would be these: liberal arts. And what we all know about liberal arts people is that they are interested in everything and nothing less. And so you have to say so many things about a real classic kind of guy like Karl, who was interested in everything and nothing less. Who was probably really one of those Vikings for us, who would have been more at home in the arts and crafts movement of the 19th century than in this end of the 20th century and this early part of the 21st. You remember that in the arts and crafts movement in American culture, intellectuals tried to keep doing things with their hands, and the things they hated the most was shoddiness. Things that didn't really make it all the way to their excellence. So liberal arts is the one way I would put this man who I really came to love so much. I might also put it in a little more paradoxical way and say that he was a very well-educated autodidact. Paradox implied. Karl knew how to learn things, whether it was a computer or a gutter, a Christmas tree, or an ABC Baptist ordination committee, or how to run a church. When Judson's had hard things to do in the past, you know who did them for us? It was Karl Garlid. Many of you remember and know the stories. He knew how to learn about a marriage or a poker game, a restaurant, or how to teach English to kids, how to string lights, how to make drama, how to be useful in very small ways. He knew how to say, I'll get the stuff from Costco for the party. So you said it so well. He was useful. He knew at Grace House, the Judson parsonage, when things would kind of go wrong, he was the one we would call, and he'd come over and do something about it. He knew how to. He was not just an autodidact, but also somebody who was very well educated. Williams College was tremendously important to this very well educated man. A lot of us have excess degrees. Karl took 4 years and learned a lot. Learned how to love opera, how to love literature. I didn't know about the Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but I'm not one bit surprised at all. He knew about travel. He knew about beauty. He loved fine things while never being snobby or snotty about it. I remember the story when they came back from Italy on this last trip and your wallets had been stolen. That was, of course, unfortunate. But in thinking about preparing to say these few words, I wanted to say Karl's identity was never stolen by anybody in Italy or elsewhere. He had a strong sense of self. He knew who he was, and you knew that he knew who he was when you were in the room with him. He and Mary had a marriage made in heaven, for heaven. I loved watching them move around their kitchen in the so many, many instances of hospitality. They moved without touching each other in a kind of rhythm that said how well they knew each other. Or I watched them talk about what wonderful project they should engage in next in their beautiful house, or laughing simply over a bottle of wine, or saying to each other at the end in the hospital goodbye with such integrity and beauty. If they fussed or feuded, they hid it well. That's good. I didn't see fussing and feuding. Instead, I saw two people, as so many of us have said, who were just joined at the hip. They were there with each other. They never completed each other's sentences, thank God, in that kind of gooey intimacy that gets in the way of things. But instead, they completed each other. Like yin needs yang, or mustard needs a ham sandwich, or a cat needs a lap. Okay, maybe a couple cats, maybe 3 cats, maybe 4 cats. Sometimes the cat thing was a little overdone. So Karl was a well-educated autodidact and also a man who married well. I can't begin to fathom Mary's loss, and I also know that she can. Because Mary is as wise as Karl, is as wise as Mary, is as wise as Karl, is as wise as Mary. They taught each other and learned from each other and had a mutuality that makes most marriages look small. Finally, I want to say a word about Karl's faith. He and Peter are indeed PKs. They were stewed in the parsonage, baked in the Bible, acquitted sola fide, sola gratia, perfected in the potluck, and how shall I put it? cleared by the casserole. Karl died with Maundy Thursday Eucharist on his lips, and he wasn't well by Maundy Thursday this year. I said, "Karl, do you know what day it is?" when he asked for communion. And he said, "Of course I know what day it is. It's Maundy Thursday. And I'll take the bread and wine now, thank you." He died with the Psalms refuge in his heart and only one fear. You know, I kept saying, are you afraid? Were you afraid last night? Will you be afraid tomorrow morning? And he said, "No, I am not afraid of death. I've never been afraid of death," he said, "a day in my life. The only thing I care about is whether Mary will be okay." He had the faith of a giant. He died well, and he doesn't need to worry about Mary. Amen. Please rise as you are able and pray with me. First, let me say that we give thanks, O God, for Karl Garlid and all that he was by nature and by grace. We know that all of his failures and all of the times he lost his way are forgiven. We also know now that his body is commended ashes to ashes, stardust to stardust, and that he is with all of us in the place where we will all go. Ashes, stardust. Amen. Please join me in the unison benediction. To get to it. Sorry. At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the first blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are a part of us as we remember them.